Okay, so why Microsoft Fabric, right? Before we talk about, what is Microsoft Fabric, let's talk about, why did Microsoft create this, right? Scalable analytics is complex in any organization. Like you look at all different systems that need to be integrated and all different tools that are being used. One thing doesn't integrate with another, there is a lot of hassle, right? And the way we kind of solve that problem at Microsoft is that, if you stay on the Microsoft stack, like if you use our, Synapse and Azure ML, our data factory, if you stay in the Azure cloud and use all the Azure native services, and there is a seamless integration between them through the Microsoft Entra and all this networking connectivity that exists. That kind of simplifies some of those integration challenges, but it's still not ideal because you still have too many components that need to be managed and too many knobs to control. And one of the frequent asks from customer is, well, what's the best practice for implementing something like this, and how do I optimize cost, how do I optimize performance, how should I be managing my clusters? And it was such a frequently asked questions from customer that we ended up creating program that we kind of started delivering the same thing over and over again. And over time we realized that it would be easier to create a product that out of the box implements everything, and everything is already integrated. So that's what gave birth to Microsoft Fabric, going from PaaS, which is like if you use Azure Synapse or Data Factory, the Azure Data Factory, or you know any of our other analytics products, they are all PaaS solution. So the Microsoft Fabric is now a SaaS solution. It's a software as service similar to your Office application, and now it's part of the Azure core service. So when you enable Azure in your environment, there are a set of services that are kind of turned on by default. Now, Microsoft Fabric is one of those services, right? So because it's now part of the Azure core service, you just kind of have it without even asking for it. Of course, you are not paying for it. We'll talk about how to pay for it later. So there is something called Fabric Capacity that you buy to get the license for start using the compute, because you only pay for the compute. It's a software service that you don't pay anything for just having the service. You pay for the compute. And it's a complete analytics platform. It includes everything starting from ingestion to data engineering to building models and data science to building reports. And it has Copilot, like the earlier talks mentioned. On top of that, it also includes security and governance. Right? So the way it works is, there is a common storage layer, which is called OneLake. So think of OneLake as your OneDrive for your enterprise data lake, right? So it's kind of works like OneDrive. It's when you go into Fabric, it's just there. It's not a another storage that you provision and attach. It's just there because it's SaaS, right? And then there is a common compute. So you no longer create one cluster for your Spark, one cluster for your warehouse, one for your real-time analytics, one for your ETL, right? So that you don't have to create all these different compute. There is one compute that is shared across all of your services. There is one storage that everything just has connection to. So that simplifies your compute management, your storage management, and your integration, uh, you know, completely, because it's everything is just integrated and there out of the box. On top of the one leg, the Microsoft Purview, which is our data governance layer, that's also tightly integrated into the fabric itself. So without even provisioning Purview or connecting Purview to scan your data source in one lake, you get the purview lineage capability right within Microsoft Fabric. Okay, so these are kind of the different layers under the hood. Okay, so right at the bottom, you have your intelligent data fabric with one lake. So one lake contains your storage. Then on top of that, there is a security model called one security. So there is a single security model for you provisioning users and different levels of access control into Fabric. So that's what kind of decides who can perform what type of task on Fabric and who can see what. Okay? Then you have your universal compute capacity, which is your Fabric capacity. You have a shared workspace. If you are familiar with Power BI workspace, this is kind of the same concept because Fabric is your next gen of Power BI. It's your next gen of Synapse. It's next gen of all of these services, right? On top of that, it's AI assisted because there is a co-pilot which will assist you in setting up your ETL pipeline. It will assist you in creating reports, everything. So it's just kind of there to help you with some of the frequently used tasks that you can interact with natural language. Okay? So starting with the ingestion part of Microsoft Fabric is called Data Factory, borrowed from the Azure Data Factory, but it's no longer Azure Data Factory. It's now Data Factory in Microsoft Fabric because there are some subtle changes. Okay? Because there is, if you're familiar with Azure Data Factory, there is something called mapping data flow. But here we have a data flow which is we call the Gen 2 of data flow, which is like taking from the best of uh, data flow in Power BI and the data flow in Azure Data Factory. Okay? But it works very similar. You'll find the interface to be very similar. There is a notebook interface, there is a Spark job interface, there are data pipelines similar to Synapse pipeline or pipeline in Azure Data Factory. And of course, there is data flow. So you have a code-based approach that you can do everything in notebook. And then you have a UI-based approach where you can do data pipeline or data flow. Okay? And there are over 100 source connectors to connect to everything, right? Not just stuff within Azure, in other cloud to on-prem, just like you have connectors in Data Factory and Synapse Pipeline, similar connectors exist here. The Synapse Pipeline is a no-code platform to build your pipeline using a UI-driven IDE that you are familiar with in Azure Data Factory and Synapse. The same thing is available here. Plus, if you are, more into the Power BI data flow or mapping data flow interface, there is data flow in Microsoft Fabric, and which will allow you to do more complex transformation using that Power BI type of environment. On top of that, this allows you to kind of create virtualization. If many of you remember virtualization in SQL Server and in some of the other SQL solutions, uh, where you could connect and to an external database and just have it visible from within your database as a symbolic link, right? Similar services available here. It's called a shortcut. With shortcut, you basically have a gateway, a symbolic link to connect to your external data source. It could be another database, it could be another service in another cloud, right? So this is your data virtualization solution that's available from within Fabric. That on top of what's available from your one lake, you can start building shortcuts to all of your other data sources in Azure or even other cloud or on-prem that you can kind of virtually see that it's all there in Fabric, even though it actually resides somewhere else. Okay. Another feature is mirroring. right? Besides the shortcut where you are kind of getting a symbolic link and you are, you know, just seeing a shortcut to it without actually having the data replicated, sometimes it is actually beneficial to replicate the data, typically in a real-time analytics scenario. Okay, so for that, there is a feature called mirroring in Microsoft Fabric. If you remember in Synapse, there was something called Synapse Link. This is kind of the next gen of that. Here, the data is replicated, and the advantage is you want to replicate and have a analytics replica of your database. And since the data lives in one lake, it can be in Delta format, which will enable you to do a data warehouse endpoint or data lake endpoint on your data in Microsoft Fabric that's a replica of your database, and that would instantly allow you to perform data warehousing type of query or advanced analytics and machine learning type of analytics on your data, and that does not take away any throughput of your operational database, which might be connected to a live application that's still serving that application. So your application does not suffer any performance downgrade because you are working off of the replica that's in Fabric. On top of that, this also acts like a utility for your database that you can not only query that database from here, you can also do insert and updates to your source database from within Fabric. Now, like I said, once you have data in Microsoft Fabric One Lake, there are two types of endpoints that you can create. There is the Synapse data warehouse endpoint, which is very similar to the dedicated SQL pool you had in Synapse. And then there is a SQL endpoint for Lakehouse, which is similar to if you know the Databricks SQL or Spark SQL, that's a SQL interface on a Spark workload in one lake. So you can create, both your traditional data warehousing type of MPP type of queries or Spark SQL based analytics. If it just depends if you want to use Spark as your compute or you want to use your warehouse as your compute. Then there is the notebook interface. There is a web version of it. You can log into Fabric and write code in Notebook in the Fabric, similar to the Synapse Spark Notebook, or you can connect your Fabric to VS Code. Many organizations don't allow people to have access to the portal, but they give them an IDE. So within the IDE, you can connect your Fabric workspace and you can write code within your notebook, connect it to some kind of repository like Azure DevOps or GitHub, and you can perform your CI/CD here, but your code would actually live within Microsoft Fabric and execute on Fabric Compute. For data science, you can use that notebook environment to build your machine learning model. You can use popular open source library like MLflow, Synapse ML. There is connectivity to Azure AI to implement Azure OpenAI model.
That's where going.
Sorry. Okay, so this integration to Azure AI Studio helps you bring in models that you have in Azure AI Studio to implement your Azure OpenAI LLM models from within Microsoft Fabric. In Power BI, there were like two types of connections. Right? You had your direct query mode where data lives somewhere and you have a connection to that in Power BI. And when you query, the query is kind of sent down to the data source and the data is aggregated there, sent back, which gives you more real-time update, but it can be there can be latency issue because you are doing that back and forth, right? The alternative is there is an import mode where you import entire data into a data set in Power BI. So the data lives in memory. So your queries run really fast, but the downside is the data that's in memory of your Power BI might be a little out of date from your source data. Right? So with Microsoft Fabric, there is a new type of connection called the direct lake mode. Okay, so with direct lake mode, you have this Power BI analysis service, which is constantly scanning your data in one lake that's in Delta format, and anytime there is a change, since the data in Delta format has that CDC, it uses that CDC to kind of update the data model within your analysis service. So when you query, you are almost always getting the latest data with lowest latency. So that kind of gives you the best of both worlds. And if you are implementing mirroring your different databases into Microsoft Fabric OneLake, you can use this direct lake mode to query tables within your database using this direct lake mode connection. On top of that, you can also cross-join your tables in your database to any other Delta table in OneLake. This is called
Arun,
yeah.
we've got a few minutes left because I want to make sure we have enough time for
Yeah,
Andrew.
I think I'm almost done. Okay, so with the semantic link, if you create a data science model or BI model from Power BI, you can connect to your semantic models. There is a feature called Data Activator, which can watch your Power BI columns for changes, and you can react to changes. Like you can send a Teams message, Outlook email message, and you can process a real-time feed from there. Uh, all of the typical regulatory compliance certifications are there in Fabric. You get your network security with private IP, uh, and you have your role-based access control that you would expect. I talked about Purview governance. You get Purview data lineage out of the box in Fabric. And that's the end of it. Here are some helpful links that I'll share in the deck.